This is Rita Lazar and her brother Abe. Abe was killed in the Twin Towers on September the 11th. He might have saved himself, but chose to help a disabled friend.
My view does not look out on the World Trade Center, but I'm on the 15th floor in Lower Manhattan, and I ran across the hall to my friend's apartment, and her windows looked out on the World Trade Center, and I got there in time to see the second plane hit the second building. And strangely enough, it was only then that I said, oh my God, my brother's in that building. Danny, my son's best friend, called and said, can I come over? And we said, sure. And he said, did you watch the president's speech? And we said, no. And he said, he mentioned your brother. And I looked at him and I said, what are you talking about? And then I thought, gee, there must have been a lot of people who stayed behind with their friends in wheelchairs. You know, you don't think that it's your own brother. You don't think that. But it was my brother. And immediately I knew that my country was going to use my brother's death to justify killing innocent people in Afghanistan and wherever else they would look.
Rita decided to go to Afghanistan to comfort the victims of the American bombing. She met Orifa and took her to the American embassy in Kabul to seek compensation for the killing of her family.
I'll tell you about Orifa. She had taken a translated description of what had happened to her and her family to the American embassy to ask for help, and had been turned away and told, go away, you're a beggar.
The oppressed people of Afghanistan will know the generosity of America and our allies. As we strike military targets, we will also drop food, medicine, and supplies to the starving and suffering men and women and children of Afghanistan. The United States of America is a friend to the Afghan people.
Such a friend that out of $10 billion spent in Afghanistan in the last 2 years, the majority has been spent on the military. Of all the great humanitarian disasters, few countries have been helped less than Afghanistan. Only 3% of all international aid has been for reconstruction. Such a friend that the United States has yet to clear these unexploded cluster bombs it dropped in the center of Kabul, where children play in the lethal rubble. And children are supposed to learn in this devastation. The Afghan government gets less than 20% of the aid that is delivered. Omar Zakawal is a government official in Kabul.
Well, 20% is about 300 million.
300 million? You're meant to rebuild the country, basically, with 300 million.
Oh, no. The government does not have its own resources for the ordinary budget. The 300 million become salaries and electricity and those. No, those are not for reconstruction.
That sounds like you're left with almost nothing.
The government has no money for reconstruction, period.
New York. The water in this typical Afghan village may look clean, but it's contaminated, and most of the children suffer from preventable diseases. Since the overthrow of the Taliban, little has changed. For these people, life is just as dangerous. I found the population of 2 villages living destitute in the rubble of this shoe factory in Kabul. They'd fled attacks by warlords who'd robbed them and kidnapped their wives and daughters. I've spent much of my life in places of upheaval, but I've rarely seen such a bombed and blasted and ruined city as Kabul. Most of the damage was done not by the Taliban, but by the Afghan warlords backed and trained and funded by America for more than 20 years. The same warlords who have been effectively put back into power by George Bush. While Afghanistan's liberation from the Taliban was welcomed here and brought certain freedoms, such as the opening of schools and the playing of music, for many people, another kind of terror replaced it, one barely acknowledged in the West. And not only has the government in Kabul no power and no money, the president, Hamid Karzai, dares not leave his office without his 42 bodyguards from the US Special Forces. Real power is held by these men, warlords, whose record of repression and brutality is little different from the Taliban. Many Afghans regard them as no better. For 4 years from 1992, they fought each other for control of Kabul, killing 50,000 innocent people and smashing the city to rubble. By any definition, the warlords are terrorists, bribed by the Americans with a fortune in cash and truckloads of arms. Today they control the government in Kabul and have re-established the opium trade, from which comes most of the heroin reaching the streets of Britain. Now Human Rights Watch has broken the silence, documenting atrocities committed by gunmen and warlords who have essentially hijacked the country.